The Galactic Council chamber fell silent when the human delegation walked in. Ambassador Chen Wei stood at the front, her team of engineers and scientists behind her. She was small compared to the towering Velkari delegates and the massive Grothian representatives, but she walked with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she brought to the table. High Counselor Thixaner, a being of flowing silver tendrils and glowing eyes, raised one appendage for attention. The human delegation is recognized. You may present your proposal. Chen Wei stepped forward and activated the holographic display. A planet appeared, spinning slowly in the air above the council floor. It was a dead world, brown and gray, with toxic clouds and no water visible on its surface. "This is Kepler 442b, Chen Wei said. "Your surveys marked it as permanently uninhabitable. Class 7, toxic atmosphere, surface temperatures ranging from -60 to +120 degrees, seismic instability and radiation levels that would kill most species within days." The Velkari ambassador made a sound that the translator rendered as dismissive laughter. "We are aware of the planet's classification, human. We discarded it from our colonization lists 300 years ago. What is your point?" Chen Wei smiled. It was a patient smile, the kind that humans had learned to wear when dealing with species that had never faced true hardship. "My point, Ambassador, is that my team can make this planet livable within 18 standard years." The chamber erupted in noise. Clicking, whistling, rumbling, and 100 other sounds of disbelief filled the air. High Counselor Thixaner had to pulse bright light from their body 3 times before order was restored. "This is impossible," said Grothian Representative Morvex, their massive bodies shifting in their specially designed chair. "Our best terraforming efforts take a minimum of 200 years for Class 3 worlds. Class 7 is beyond all current technology." "Beyond your technology," Chen Wei said simply, "not beyond ours." She changed the holographic display. Now it showed Earth, but not the green and blue marble that the Council had seen in human promotional materials. This was Earth as it had been 65 million years ago, then 20,000 years ago, then 500 years ago. "This is where we come from," Chen Wei said. "A world where the climate tried to freeze us, burn us, and drown us, where the very air we breathed could turn poisonous, where the ground shook without warning and mountains exploded with liquid rock, where invisible radiation from our own sun constantly damaged our cells." She paused, letting the images cycle through ice ages, volcanic winters, and the pollution of early industrialization. "Every species in this council evolved on what you call garden worlds, stable climates, predictable seasons, gentle environments that stayed the same for millions of years." Chen Wei's voice was soft, but it carried through the entire chamber. "Humanity evolved on a death world. We survived because we learned to change our environment instead of waiting for it to change us." The Velkari ambassador shifted uncomfortably. "We are aware of Earth's classification, but surviving a death world does not mean you can create garden worlds from nothing." "Actually," said Dr. James Okonkwo, stepping forward from the human team, "that is exactly what it means." He was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes that had seen thousands of worlds through telescope lenses and spacecraft windows. "May I?" Chen Wei nodded and stepped aside. Dr. Okonkwo took control of the display. "Terraforming is not magic," he said. "It is applied pressure. It is understanding systems so completely that you can push them in the directions you want. And no species in the galaxy understands hostile environments better than humans." He showed images now. Mars, red and dead when humans first arrived, now showing patches of green under domed cities. Venus, its crushing atmosphere slowly being processed by massive floating factories. Titan Europa, even the shattered remains of asteroids rebuilt into spinning habitats. "We started terraforming before we ever left our home system," Dr. Okonkwo continued. Because we had no choice. Earth was not enough for us. It was never stable enough, never safe enough, never predictable enough. So we learned to make worlds. High Counselor the Xanar leaned forward, their silver tendrils waving with interest. These are impressive achievements within your own system, but Kepler 442b is far more hostile than any of these examples. With respect, High Counselor, said Dr. Okonkwo, it is not. It is simply hostile in different ways, and humans have faced every kind of hostility the universe can offer. He pulled up a new image. This is my grandmother's village in what was once called Nigeria. During her childhood, the average temperature increased by 4 degrees. The rain stopped coming. The crops died. The water disappeared. The image showed cracked earth and empty wells. The galactic community would have classified this as a localized extinction event and moved on. But humans do not move on. My grandmother's generation rebuilt the water systems. They changed the crops. They found new ways to live. They turned a dying land into a thriving community within 30 years. He changed the image again. This is the Netherlands on Earth, a country that should not exist. It is below sea level. The ocean should have swallowed it thousands of years ago. But humans built walls and pumps and systems so complex that they held back the sea itself. They made land where there was only water. The council chamber was quiet now. The various species were listening, really listening, for perhaps the first time. Chen Wei stepped forward again. What we are offering the Galactic Council is not just terraforming services. We are offering a new way of thinking about the universe. For too long, the Council has looked at hostile worlds and seen only death. We look at them and see potential. She brought up the image of Kepler 442b again. This world can support the Melthari refugees, all 6 billion of them. Their home system was destroyed by a stellar event that no one could have prevented. They have been living on stations and borrowed planets for 2 generations now, waiting for a new home that never comes. The mention of the Melthari caused another stir. They were a tragedy that the Council had failed to address for decades. Garden worlds were rare. None of the existing member species wanted to give up territory, and traditional terraforming timelines meant that most of the current generation would die before ever walking on solid ground again. 18 years, Chen Wei repeated. That is our offer. We will transform this dead world into a home for the Melthari. In exchange, we ask only for recognition of human terraforming rights and a fair payment for our services. High Counselor the Xanar's glow dimmed thoughtfully. And if you fail, if this world remains dead despite your efforts? Chen Wei's smile did not waver. Humans do not fail at survival, High Counselor. We cannot afford to. Our evolution did not allow for that luxury. The council called for a recess to discuss the proposal. As the delegates filed out, speaking in hushed tones among themselves, the Melthari ambassador approached the human delegation. She was delicate, with iridescent scales and large, wet eyes that reflected the chamber lights like pools of sadness. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can you really give us a home?" Chen Wei reached out and took the ambassador's slender hand in her own rough, calloused grip. "I promise you," she said, "we will make you a world." The transport ship Perseverance dropped out of faster-than-light travel and immediately began scanning Kepler 442b. On the bridge, Captain Maria Santos watched the data stream across her screens with a practiced eye. Radiation levels, high. Atmospheric composition, deadly. Surface stability, poor. She smiled. It was nothing they had not seen before. "All right, people," she called out. "Welcome to our new project. I want full atmospheric mapping within 6 hours. Dr. Okonkwo, your team is cleared for initial probe deployment. Let us get to work." The Perseverance was not a warship or an exploration vessel. It was something the other species of the galaxy had never built. A dedicated terraforming platform. 3 kilometers long, packed with factories, laboratories, and living quarters for 5,000 specialists. It could sustain itself indefinitely, producing everything it needed from raw materials gathered from asteroids and moons. Dr. Okonkwo was already in the probe bay, checking the first wave of atmospheric samplers. His team moved around him with the efficiency of people who had done this many times before. "This atmosphere is thick with sulfur compounds," said Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the team's atmospheric chemist. She was studying the initial readings on her tablet, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Classic volcanic outgassing. The good news is it's stable. We're not looking at ongoing eruptions." "The bad news?" Dr. Okonkwo asked. "The sulfur cycle is self-sustaining. We'll need to break it before we can introduce oxygen-producing organisms." She looked up with a grin. "Should be fun." Another team member, engineer Pavel Volkov, lumbered over with a heavy case of equipment. He was a big man who had spent 20 years building habitats on some of the harshest moons in human space. "I've run preliminary structural analysis on the proposed colony sites. We've got bedrock stable enough for foundation work at 3 locations in the northern hemisphere." "Only 3?" Dr. Okonkwo raised an eyebrow. "For now. The southern hemisphere has some interesting geology that might yield more options once we stabilize the seismic activity." Pavel set down the case and cracked his knuckles. "I'm thinking deep injection wells. We did something similar on Io, remember?" Dr. Okonkwo did remember. Io had been a moon of constant volcanic activity, its surface reshaped by tidal forces from Jupiter. Conventional wisdom said it could never be tamed, but human engineers had found ways to redirect that energy, channeling it into geothermal power systems that now supplied a thriving industrial colony. "Do it," he said. "I want proposals on my desk by tomorrow." As the probes launched into the toxic sky, carrying their sensors and samplers into the choking clouds, Dr. Okonkwo allowed himself a moment of reflection. He thought about his grandmother, about the stories she had told him of a land that fought against human existence every single day. She had never seen the stars. She had never known that her struggle against a hostile environment was preparing her descendants for something greater. "Dr. Okonkwo," Yuki's voice interrupted his thoughts. "We're getting some unusual readings from the third probe. There's some kind of geological formation about 200 kilometers north of the primary site. Looks artificial." Dr. Okonkwo frowned. "Artificial, show me." The image that appeared on the screen made his heart skip. It was buried under centuries of dust and volcanic ash, but the shape was unmistakable. Straight lines, right angles, a structure. Someone had been here before. High Counselor Thixaner received the news with what the translator interpreted as surprise. "Ruins, on Kepler 442b. Chen Wei nodded through the communication screen. She was still aboard the Perseverance asterisk, which had moved into closer orbit around the planet. "Pre-galactic, from what we can tell. Our dating estimates suggest they're at least 3 million years old. Whatever species built them, they're long gone." "This changes things," Thixaner said. "The archaeological preservation accords require that all pre-galactic sites be studied before any environmental alteration takes place. This could delay your project by decades." Chen Wei had expected this response. The galactic community was obsessed with preserving the past, even when that preservation meant condemning the present. "With respect, High Counselor, we have no intention of destroying the ruins. In fact, we believe they may help us." "Help you how?" "We're still analyzing the site, but initial readings suggest the structure was designed for atmospheric processing. Whoever lived here was trying to do exactly what we're doing now, make this world livable." Chen Wei leaned forward. "They failed, but they left behind technology that might show us what not to do, and more importantly, they left behind proof that this world can be changed." Thixaner's tendrils waved in a pattern that suggested deep thought. "You propose to continue your work while studying the ruins." We propose to do what humans have always done, learn from those who came before us and do better. Chen Wei pulled up the holographic display, showing the planned terraforming stages alongside the location of the ruins. We'll establish a protected zone around the archaeological site. Our atmospheric processing will start in the northern hemisphere, well away from the ruins. By the time we need to expand southward, we'll have completed our studies and found ways to preserve the structures. And if preservation proves impossible? Chen Wei was quiet for a moment. This was the question that would define humanity's relationship with the galactic community. Would they be seen as creators or destroyers? Then we'll make a choice, she finally said. The same choice every species makes when survival conflicts with history, but I don't think it will come to that. Humans are very good at finding ways to have both. The High Counselor's glow shifted to a warmer tone. You continue to surprise us, Ambassador. Very well. The Council will allow your project to proceed, with regular updates on both the terraforming progress and the archaeological findings. Do not make us regret this decision. We won't, Chen Wei promised. When the communication ended, she turned to find Dr. Okonkwo waiting. His face was troubled. There's something you need to see, he said. Something we found in the ruins. They took a shuttle down through the toxic atmosphere, landing at the base camp that had been established near the archaeological site. Human workers moved about in heavy environmental suits, setting up equipment and running cables. The air outside was death, but inside the temporary habitats, it was warm and breathable. Dr. Okonkwo led Chen Wei to a tent where the first artifacts had been brought for analysis. On a table sat a small object, roughly the size of a human hand. It was made of some kind of metal that had resisted 3 million years of corrosion. It's a data storage device, Dr. Okonkwo said. We managed to activate it about an hour ago. Chen Wei looked at the object, then at the scientist's face. What does it contain? A message from whoever built this place. He paused. They called themselves the Builders, and according to their records, they weren't the first to try terraforming this world. They were the 7th. The weight of that statement settled over Chen Wei like a heavy blanket. 7 different species, across millions of years, had tried to make this dead world live. All of them had failed. Do we know why they failed? Dr. Okonkwo nodded slowly. The records are fragmentary, but there's a consistent pattern. Every attempt destabilized something they didn't understand. A geological process, an atmospheric cycle, something that seemed unimportant until it wasn't. He met Chen Wei's eyes. They all got close enough to think they had succeeded, and then something went wrong. Chen Wei was silent for a long moment. Outside, she could hear the wind howling through the toxic clouds, carrying dust and poison across a landscape that had rejected life 7 times before. Then we need to understand what they didn't, she finally said. Download everything from that device. Get our best people on it. If 7 species failed at this, there's a reason, and we're going to find it. She turned and walked toward the habitat exit, pausing to pull on her environmental suit. Ambassador, Dr. Okonkwo called after her. Where are you going? Chen Wei sealed her helmet and looked back. To walk on the ground, to feel what we're dealing with. That's how humans learn, Doctor. Not just from data and sensors, but from putting our feet on the earth and refusing to leave until we understand it. She stepped out into the howling wind, into an environment that had killed millions of would-be colonists across thousands of millennia. And she smiled inside her helmet, because this was what humanity was made for. The dead world stretched out before her, waiting to be transformed, waiting for a species stubborn enough to refuse failure. 3 years passed on Kepler 442b, and the world began to change. The first visible transformation was in the sky. What had once been a uniform brown-gray ceiling of toxic clouds now showed patches of different color. High above the northern hemisphere, massive atmospheric processors floated on magnetic currents, breaking down sulfur compounds and releasing oxygen. Dr. Yuki Tanaka stood on the observation deck of the primary processing station, watching the clouds swirl below. She had not seen a natural sky in 3 years, but she had seen this artificial one transform from death to the first hints of life. Oxygen levels in the treatment zone have reached 12%, reported her assistant, a young man named Carlos who had been fresh out of university when they started. Still not breathable, but we're ahead of schedule. Yuki nodded, making notes on her tablet. What about the sulfur cycling? Any signs of recovery? Minimal. The deep injection wells are working better than projected. We're actually seeing some natural geological adjustment that's helping us. Carlos grinned. It's like the planet wants to be changed. Yuki did not smile. She had learned through years of hard experience that planets did not want anything. They were systems, complex and interconnected, and assuming they cooperated was a good way to get killed. Keep monitoring, she said. I want to know the moment anything unexpected happens. On the surface, engineer Pavel Volkov was facing his own challenges. The bedrock that had seemed so stable in initial surveys had revealed hidden fracture lines, nothing that threatened the immediate work, but concerning for long-term construction. He stood in the foundation pit of what would eventually be the first permanent colony structure, surrounded by workers in environmental suits. The walls of the pit showed layers of geological history, each one telling a story of a world that had been violent and unstable for billions of years. We need to go deeper, Pavel said to his team lead, a woman named Agiora who had built structures on half a dozen hostile worlds. At least another 50 meters, maybe more. Agiora whistled. That's a lot of extra work, boss, the schedule. The schedule doesn't matter if the building falls down in 100 years, Pavel interrupted. The Melthari are going to live here. Their children are going to live here. Their grandchildren. We build this right or we don't build it at all. It was a philosophy that had been drilled into every human engineer since the species first started building things. Not just for now, but for always. Cathedrals that took generations to build. Walls that stood for millennia. A defiance of time that came from knowing just how short human lives really were. Agiora nodded. I'll adjust the plans, going to need more equipment though. Put in the request. The Perseverance can manufacture whatever we need. Pavel looked up at the toxic sky, where distant atmospheric processors floated like mechanical clouds. We've got time. The Melthari have waited this long. They can wait a little longer if it means doing it right. In the archaeological zone, Dr. Okonkwo had assembled a team of specialists to study the ruins and the data extracted from the builder device. They had set up a dedicated research habitat, protected from the ongoing terraforming work by a wide buffer zone. The ruins themselves were larger than initial scans had suggested. What had looked like a single structure was actually a complex of buildings, connected by underground passages that extended for kilometers. The builders had been serious about their attempt to colonize this world. I think I've figured out what went wrong, said Dr. Helena Vasquez, the team's xenoarchaeologist. She was young for such a position, barely 30, but she had a gift for understanding alien thinking that had impressed even seasoned veterans. Dr. Okonkwo looked up from his own work. Tell me. Helena brought up a holographic display showing a map of the planet's geological features. The builders focused on the atmosphere just like we're doing. They were actually quite sophisticated about it, but they missed something underground. She zoomed in on a region about 500 kilometers south of the current terraforming zone. There's a massive reservoir of trapped gases here. Methane, carbon dioxide, other compounds. It's been stable for millions of years because of the pressure from the rock above it, but the builders didn't know about it. And their terraforming disturbed it, Dr. Okonkwo asked. Indirectly, they changed the atmospheric pressure, not by much but enough to alter the equilibrium. The reservoir started to leak, slowly at first, then faster. Within a few centuries of what they thought was successful terraforming, the gas releases had undone all their work. Dr. Okonkwo studied the display, his mind racing. Is this reservoir still there? Yes, and it's even bigger now. 3 million years of additional accumulation. Helena's face was grim. If we make the same mistake, the results will be worse. Much worse. The implications were staggering. They had been proceeding with their terraforming plan, confident in their abilities, and all along they had been building toward the same failure that had destroyed 7 previous attempts. We need to tell Chen Wei, Dr. Okonkwo said, and we need to stop the atmospheric processing until we figure out how to deal with this. Stop, Helena looked surprised, but the schedule. Damn the schedule. Dr. Okonkwo was already moving toward the communication station. We're not going to be the 8th species to fail at this. Ambassador Chen Wei received the news with the calm that had become her trademark. She listened to Dr. Okonkwo's explanation, studied the data Helena had prepared, and asked careful questions until she understood the full scope of the problem. So we need to deal with this reservoir before we can proceed, she summarized. What are our options? We could try to seal it, Helena suggested. Reinforce the rock above it to prevent any pressure changes from affecting the equilibrium. That's a temporary solution, Dr. Okonkwo countered. It might hold for centuries, maybe even millennia, but eventually something will disturb it. A meteor impact, tectonic activity, something we can't predict. Then we need a permanent solution, Chen Wei said. What would that look like? The team was quiet for a long moment. Then Pavel, who had joined the conference remotely from the construction site, spoke up. We could release it, he said. Deliberately, control the process instead of letting it happen randomly. Release billions of cubic meters of trapped gas into an atmosphere we're trying to purify. Dr. Tanaka's voice was incredulous. That would set us back years, maybe decades. Better than setting us back to zero, Pavel replied. Look, I've dealt with similar situations on other worlds. Underground ice reservoirs, trapped volatiles, unstable geological formations. The answer is always the same. You can't fight geology. You can only work with it. Chen Wei considered this. It was the human approach, refined across millennia of struggle against a hostile planet. Don't try to control nature. Try to redirect it. Can we use the released gases? She asked. Turn them into something beneficial instead of harmful. Dr. Tanaka's eyes lit up. That's actually not a terrible idea. If we knew exactly what was in the reservoir, we could potentially design processing systems to convert the gases as they're released. It would mean reconfiguring our entire atmospheric strategy, but it could work, Chen Wei finished. Do it. I want a new plan on my desk within a month. We're not going to fail like the others. We're going to find a way to succeed that they never imagined. As the team dispersed to begin their new work, Dr. Okonkwo lingered. Ambassador, there's something else you should know. The builder records include messages from the other failed attempts, warnings left by species who knew they were about to lose everything. What do they say? Dr. Okonkwo's face was thoughtful. They all say the same thing in different ways. This world cannot be changed. This world rejects life. This world is meant to be dead. They gave up, Chen Wei. Every single one of them got to a point where they decided that failure was inevitable and they stopped trying. Chen Wei walked to the window of her office, looking out at the transformed sky. And that's why they failed. Not because the world was too hostile, not because the challenges were too great, but because they accepted defeat. She turned back to Dr. Okonkwo. Humans don't accept defeat, James. We never have, we never will, and that's why we're going to succeed where 7 other species failed. Year 7 of the terraforming project brought the first real test of human determination. The controlled release of the underground reservoir had begun 6 months earlier, carefully managed to minimize atmospheric disruption. For the first few months, everything went according to plan. The gases rose through specially designed venting shafts, were captured by processing stations, and were converted into useful compounds. Then the earthquake happened. It was not a large earthquake by historical standards. Magnitude 6.4, centered about 100 kilometers from the main venting operation. On Earth, it would have been damaging but manageable. On Kepler 442b, it triggered a cascade that threatened to destroy everything they had built. The earthquake destabilized a secondary reservoir that no one had detected. This one was not just filled with gases, but with superheated water, pressurized by the volcanic activity that still simmered beneath the planet's surface. Captain Maria Santos was in her command center when the alerts started flooding in. Seismic warnings, temperature spikes, pressure readings that went off the charts. "Talk to me," she demanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We've got a geothermal surge building under the southern venting station," reported her chief engineer. "If it breaches, we're looking at a steam explosion that could trigger the main reservoir to rupture uncontrollably." "How long do we have?" "Hours, maybe less." Santos turned to her communications officer. "Get me everyone, all team leaders, all station chiefs, emergency priority." Within minutes, the holographic displays in the command center showed dozens of faces. Engineers, scientists, administrators, workers. All of them looked worried. All of them looked to Santos for answers. "Here's the situation," she said, laying it out clearly and simply. "We have a choice to make. We can evacuate the southern zone and try to contain the damage from orbit, or we can stay and try to prevent the explosion from happening." "What are the odds?" Pavel asked. He was already at the southern station, one of the closest to the danger zone. "If we evacuate, we save everyone but lose at least 5 years of progress, maybe more. The atmospheric processing will have to start over from nearly zero." Santos paused. "If we stay and try to fix this, there's a good chance some of us won't make it." The silence that followed was heavy but not long. "I'm staying," Pavel said. "I know these systems better than anyone. If there's a way to prevent this, I need to be down there to find it." "I'm staying too," said Yuki. Her atmospheric processing stations were at risk. "This is my work. I'm not abandoning it." One by one, voices joined in. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to mount an attempt. Santos felt something swell in her chest. Pride, perhaps. Or maybe it was that peculiar human stubbornness that had carried the species through ice ages and mass extinctions. "All right," she said. "Here's what we're going to do." The plan was desperate and improvised, the kind of thing that only humans would attempt. They would use the venting shafts they had already built to redirect the pressure building beneath the southern zone. Instead of letting it explode upward, they would channel it sideways, into a series of natural lava tubes that led to an unpopulated region far from any settlements or equipment. It required precise timing, incredible coordination, and a willingness to work in conditions that would kill an unprotected human in seconds. Pavel led the team that went underground. They wore the heaviest environmental suits available, designed for the most extreme conditions humanity had ever faced. Even so, the heat was brutal, pressing against them like a physical force. "Temperature is climbing," reported one of his team members, a young woman named Lisa who had joined the project straight out of Mars Engineering Corps. "Suit integrity is holding, but we're approaching limits." "Keep moving," Pavel said. "We just need to reach the junction point and set the charges." The charges were specially designed to blast open the lava tubes without triggering additional seismic activity. It was a delicate balance, requiring placement within centimeters of the optimal locations. Above ground, Yuki was coordinating the atmospheric response. If the plan worked, They would have to deal with a massive release of steam and gases through the lava tubes. Her processing stations needed to be ready to capture and convert as much of it as possible. Stations 7 through 12 are repositioned, reported Carlos. We're as ready as we're going to be. It won't be enough, Yuki said, studying her readings. The volume is too large. We'll lose some to the atmosphere. How much? Maybe 20% of our oxygen gains. 6 months of work. She shook her head. But it's better than losing everything. In the command center, Santos watched the countdown. Pavel's team was in position. The charges were set. Everything depended on the next few minutes. Pavel, are you ready? She asked. Ready, Captain. On my mark. She took a breath. 3, 2, 1, mark. The explosion was felt before it was heard. The ground trembled, not with the violence of an earthquake, but with a deep, resonant shudder as millions of tons of pressure found a new path to follow. Alarms screamed in the command center. Data flooded across screens faster than anyone could process. But beneath the chaos, Santos saw what she was looking for. The pressure readings at the southern station were dropping. The geothermal surge was being redirected. Pavel, what's your status? She called. Static, then crackling through interference. We're still here, Captain, it worked. The cheering in the command center was deafening. People hugged each other, laughed, cried. They had faced extinction and won. But Santos did not celebrate. She was already looking at the damage reports, already calculating what they had lost and what they needed to do next. 6 months of atmospheric processing gone in an instant. 3 venting stations destroyed by the redirected surge. 2 workers injured, thankfully not seriously. And yet they were still here. The project was still alive. The dream of giving the Melthari a home was still possible. That night Chen Wei addressed the entire team. Her face was tired, but her voice was strong. Today, we proved something that no other species in the galaxy has ever proven, she said. We proved that we can face the worst this universe has to offer and refuse to give up. 7 species before us reached moments like this, moments where everything seemed lost, and they chose to walk away. We chose to stay. She paused, letting her words sink in. We lost time today, we lost equipment, we almost lost people, but we did not lose hope, and as long as we have that, this project will succeed. She smiled, and it was a smile that carried the weight of human history behind it. Now get some rest. Tomorrow we get back to work. Year 18 arrived on Kepler 442b, with a sunrise that no one had ever seen before. The clouds had thinned enough for light to reach the surface. Not much, not yet, but enough to paint the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Workers across the planet stopped what they were doing to watch. After nearly 2 decades of artificial light and toxic clouds, they were seeing the first natural dawn on a world they had transformed from death into life. Ambassador Chen Wei stood on the observation platform of what was now called First Landing, the original base camp that had grown into a small city. The air was still not breathable without assistance, but the environmental suits were lighter now, the filters more efficient, the threat less immediate. Dr. Okonkwo stood beside her, his hair now completely white, his face lined with years of work and worry and triumph. Oxygen is at 19%, he said. We hit our target 3 months early. Temperature ranges. Still wider than ideal, but manageable, between -20 and 40 in the habitable zones. The Melthari can handle that with minimal adaptation. Chen Wei nodded. The Melthari were a cold-tolerant species, originally evolved on a world with long winters. They had been following the terraforming progress with growing excitement, their ambassadors visiting regularly to see the world that was being built for them. What about the southern hemisphere? She asked. Stable. The geological activity we triggered during the crisis actually helped us in the long run. The new vent system is providing geothermal energy to 4 colony sites, and the lava tubes have been converted into protected transportation corridors. It was a human solution to a human-created problem, turning disaster into opportunity. Chen Wei had seen it happen 100 times throughout the project, each setback transformed into a stepping stone. The ruins. Dr. Okonkwo smiled. Preserved and protected, Helena's team has finished their studies. The site has been designated as a memorial to all the species who tried and failed before us. We're calling it the Gallery of Builders. It was a fitting tribute, Chen Wei thought. Those 7 species had not succeeded, but they had left behind knowledge that helped humanity avoid their mistakes. In a way, they were part of this success too. The council arrives tomorrow, she said. Is everything ready? As ready as it's going to be. Dr. Okonkwo hesitated. There's been some concern about the ceremony. Some of the council members are worried that this success will change the balance of power in the galaxy. Chen Wei was not surprised. Humanity's terraforming capabilities had already attracted attention and envy. Other species were beginning to understand what it meant to share the galaxy with a species that could transform dead worlds into living ones. Let them worry, she said. Our purpose here isn't to gain power, it's to give people homes. If the council understands that, we'll have allies. If they don't, she shrugged, then we'll keep doing what we do regardless. The next day, ships from across the galaxy arrived in orbit around Kepler 442b. High Counselor the Xaner was among the first to descend, their silver tendrils waving in what the translator rendered as amazement as they stepped onto the surface. This is truly remarkable, they said, looking around at the transformed landscape. What had once been a barren expanse of rock and dust was now showing the first signs of vegetation. Hardy plants, engineered by human biologists, were spreading across the plains, their roots breaking down rock into soil, their leaves producing oxygen. We promised you 18 years, Chen Wei said. We delivered in 17 and a half. So you did. The Xaner's glow shifted through several colors that the translator could not fully interpret. Ambassador, I must confess something. When you first presented this proposal, I did not believe you could succeed. None of us did. The Velkari ambassador wagered that you would abandon the project within 5 years. I hope you bet against him, Chen Wei said with a slight smile. I did not bet at all, but I wish I had. The Xaner paused, looking out at the horizon where more ships were landing. The Melthari are here, 6 billion of them, waiting in orbital stations for permission to descend. Are you ready to receive them? Chen Wei turned to look at the crowd gathering behind her. Human workers who had spent years turning this world into a home. Scientists who had solved problems no one else could solve. Engineers who had built structures designed to last for millennia. All of them were watching, waiting for this moment. We're ready, she said. The Melthari descent began that afternoon. Shuttles dropped through the newly purified atmosphere, carrying thousands of refugees who had never known a natural sky. They landed at First Landing, where human workers had prepared reception areas with food, shelter, and medical care. The first Melthari to step onto the ground was an elder named Veltoris, who had been among the refugees since the destruction of their home system. She was old, her scales faded and her movements slow, but her eyes were bright with tears as she felt solid ground beneath her feet. Chen Wei was there to meet her. Welcome to your new home, she said. Veltoris reached out and took the human ambassador's hands. Her grip was weak, but her voice was strong. All my life I have dreamed of this moment. My parents dreamed of it. Their parents dreamed of it. And now, because of you, it is real. It wasn't just us, Chen Wei said. 7 other species tried to make this world live. They failed, but they left behind knowledge that helped us succeed. This world belongs to all of them too. Veltoris nodded slowly. Then we will honor them all. Every species that tried, every species that helped, every species that believed this was possible. She looked up at the sky, at the thin clouds and the light that filtered through them. This world will remember. As the day went on, more and more Melthari arrived. They spread out across the planet, settling into the colony sites that human engineers had prepared for them. There were challenges, of course. The world was not yet perfect. There were still areas that were too hot, too cold, too unstable for habitation. The work of terraforming would continue for decades, maybe centuries. But the hardest part was done. Life had taken hold on a world that had rejected it for millions of years. That evening, as the first stars appeared through the clearing atmosphere, Chen Wei found herself standing alone at the edge of First Landing. The sounds of celebration reached her from the settlement behind, but she needed a moment of quiet to process everything that had happened. Dr. Okonkwo found her there, as she had known he would. "Thinking deep thoughts?" he asked. "Thinking about what comes next." Chen Wei looked up at the stars. "This is just the beginning, James. There are thousands of dead worlds out there. Millions, maybe. Worlds that the galaxy has given up on. Worlds that are waiting for someone stubborn enough to refuse to let them stay dead." "That sounds like a lot of work." "It is," she smiled. "But that's what humans do. We work, we build. We refuse to give up, no matter how impossible the odds seem." She turned to face him. "I'm going to propose a new initiative to the Council, a galactic terraforming corps led by humans but open to any species willing to learn our methods." Dr. Okonkwo raised his eyebrows. "You think the Council will agree?" "After today, I think they'll have to." Chen Wei gestured at the transformed landscape around them. "We just did the impossible, James. We made a dead world live. That's not something the galaxy can ignore." In the settlement behind them, a Melthari child laughed. It was a bright, clear sound, full of joy and wonder. The child had never known a home before this moment. Now they had a world. Chen Wei listened to that laughter and felt something settle in her heart. Pride, perhaps, or satisfaction, or maybe it was simply the feeling of a job well done. "Come on," she said to Dr. Okonkwo. "Let's go celebrate with the others." As they walked back toward the lights and sounds of the celebration, the first natural rain began to fall on Kepler 442b. It was light, barely more than a mist, but it was rain. Water falling from clouds, cycling through an atmosphere that was slowly but surely becoming capable of supporting life. The Melthari came out of their shelters to feel it on their scales. Humans lifted their faces to the sky, letting the drops touch their skin. And somewhere in orbit, the crew of the Asterisk Perseverance watched and cheered, knowing that they had been part of something that would be remembered forever. Humanity had survived a Deathworld evolution. They had learned to transform hostile environments into homes, and now they were sharing that gift with the galaxy. It was, perhaps, the greatest thing their species had ever done, and it was only the beginning.